The Ghost Train by Anna von Black. It was the faint call from the departing train that first unsettled him. "Excuse me, sir. Do you have the time?" A voice called out from the train car as it slid into the night. The man, Henry Cobb, paused, his boots crunching on the frost-kissed gravel of the platform. Reaching into his coat pocket, he froze. His pocket watch, the treasured heirloom passed down from his father, was gone. Panic set in as he patted himself down, searching in vain. "You must have dropped it," a child's voice piped up behind him. Henry spun around to see a small boy emerge from the shadows of the platform. The boy, no older than 7, had hollow eyes and a pale, waxy complexion that caught the moonlight unnervingly. In his outstretched hand was Henry's watch. "You must have lost it as you were walking," the boy said, his tone distant, as though speaking from a dream. Henry snatched the watch, his relief mingling with unease. Before he could thank the boy, the child melted back into the shadows, as if swallowed by the night. From the train, the stranger called again, his voice trailing into the frigid air. "It's 11:30. The whistle blew, and the train roared away, its lights fading into the horizon. Henry began his walk home, clutching the watch tightly. His house wasn't far from the station, a mere mile's trek along the winding country road. The lantern he carried cast flickering light on the snow-dusted path, but the further he walked, the more the road stretched impossibly ahead of him. The station, now far behind, still loomed in his mind's eye, as if it were following him. Checking his pocket, he felt the sudden absence again. The watch was gone. Dread pooling in his gut, Henry retraced his steps. There, on the ground, glinting in the moonlight, was the watch. His breath fogged in the chill as he stooped to pick it up. "Damn you," he muttered, clutching the watch tightly as he shoved it back into his pocket. "Saints above, what kind of night is this?" The walk resumed, and for a moment, the unease subsided. The frosty air nipped at his cheeks, and the trees on either side of the road stood like dark sentinels. But as he walked, he couldn't shake the feeling of eyes upon him. Glancing over his shoulder, he found nothing but shadows. Still, the hair on the back of his neck prickled. When he reached into his pocket again, his stomach dropped. The watch was gone. Again. A string of curses tumbled from his lips as he stomped back along the road. There it was, lying in the same spot as before. His anger flared as he snatched it up and shook his fist at the heavens. "If God won't help me get home," he shouted, "maybe I should ask the devil himself." The moment the words left his mouth, the night seemed to hold its breath. Then, from somewhere deep in the woods, came a sound that froze Henry in place. A cackle, low, guttural, and otherworldly. It echoed through the trees, rising in pitch until it became a scream. Henry's blood ran cold. He clutched the watch, whispering desperate prayers under his breath as he started to walk, faster this time. The crunch of snow underfoot became frantic as he broke into a jog, then a run. His lantern swung wildly in his grip, casting jagged shadows on the road. Though he glanced over his shoulder repeatedly, he saw no one, yet the sensation of being pursued grew unbearable. By the time he reached his house, his lungs burned, and his legs felt like lead. The modest farmhouse stood silent, its windows dark save for a faint glow in the parlor. Henry burst through the door, slamming it shut behind him. His wife, Clara, sat by the fire, stuffing stockings and arranging cookies on a plate. She looked up, startled. "Henry! Do you know what time it is?" He shook his head, leaning heavily against the door as he caught his breath. "The watch, it's broken," he panted. "It's fallen so many times in the cold that it stopped working." Clara frowned, setting down her sewing. "You're lying," she said, her voice sharp. "Do you know how late it is? Do you know how worried I've been?" Henry's shoulders slumped. "It's a miracle I'm home at all," he said, sinking into the nearest chair. "I could have sworn I sold my soul to a demon just to get back with this cursed watch." Clara stiffened, her eyes darting toward the stairs where their children slept. "Don't speak such things," she hissed. "Not in this house." Henry opened his hand, revealing the watch. Its face was cracked, and the hands were frozen at 11:30. A shiver ran down his spine as he stared at it, remembering the boy, the train, and that terrible laugh. "It's not the watch," Clara said quietly, placing a hand on his arm. "You've been out too long in the cold. Get some rest." Henry nodded, though sleep felt far away. That night, as the house settled into silence, he placed the watch on the mantel and sat by the fire, unable to shake the sense that something unseen was watching him still. The following morning, Henry awoke to a peculiar stillness. The fire had burned down to embers, and the house was cold. When he glanced at the mantel, his heart skipped a beat. The watch was gone. "Clara!" He called, but his voice echoed through the empty house. No reply came. He searched every room, but his wife and children were nowhere to be found. Panic bubbled in his chest as he ran outside, only to find the road blanketed in an eerie fog. The trees loomed larger than before, their branches twisted like gnarled fingers. In the distance, the faint whistle of a train broke the silence. Henry turned toward the sound, his feet moving of their own accord. The road led him back to the station, though it felt as though he had been walking for hours. There, on the platform, stood the boy. "You must have lost it again," the boy said, holding out the watch. But this time, the boy's face was different. His hollow eyes gleamed with something ancient and malevolent, and his smile was far too wide. Henry took a step back, his chest tightening. "What do you want from me?" he demanded. The boy tilted his head, his voice echoing unnaturally as he replied. "It's not the watch that's broken, Mr. Cobb. It's you." Before Henry could respond, the train roared into the station, its wheels screeching like tortured souls. The boy stepped back into the shadows, vanishing once more. And as the train doors slid open, Henry felt an invisible force pulling him forward, dragging him into the abyss. The last thing he saw was his watch, lying on the ground, its hand spinning wildly backward, and the time forever frozen at 11:30. The end. Tell me your supernatural experiences in the comments, and don't forget to turn on notifications for the next spooky holiday story.